Hello and welcome. A very happy Valentine's Day to you all. Hope you've had a fun day, whatever you're doing. And thank you for joining us in this happy hour slot before, who knows, maybe you'll be off spending some time with a very special person this evening. But for now, you have the opportunity to spend some time with some like-minded storytelling peeps who are looking for the best ways to go out there and tell stories. You know, storytelling is my business. So storytelling for business makes a lot of sense, right? But it's not about storytelling for business for me. For me, it's about your ability to understand and shape your world and whatever's in that world, right? Because that could be your company. It could be your team. You could be an entrepreneur with a fantastic new technology that you're desperate to bring to the world. Or you could be responsible for an organization of hundreds of people, thousands of people. Whatever story you're living, the better you understand the three fundamental building blocks to that story, not only will you better understand that story and be able to be intentional with it and shape it, your story, something magical happens when you start doing that for yourself. And that is, you can start to see how you can shape the stories around you. And so by shaping the stories around you, that can mean getting that product to market or inspiring that team or helping that coaching client. Because we're all saturated in stories every single day, having this type of power for yourself is really, for lack of a better word, empowering, right? Now, you might think, Matthew, 3 things? What are those 3 things? Well, we're going to talk about those 3 things today. And you might also be thinking, 3 things? What do you mean 3 things? Storytelling. The reason why I'm here today listening to you is because I'm trying to figure it out, and it's not as simple as I thought it was. Don't worry. I know what it's like to be in your shoes or some shoes that are very similar to your shoes. What do I mean by that? Well, on today's very special edition of our homepage teardown, we're going to be tearing down a homepage that's a little bit different to the normal ones that we do, but the same rules still apply. And to my point about what I understand about being in your shoes, what I mean by that is there was a time when figuring all of this stuff out for me was new. Figuring out storytelling, how to use it in business was new. And when I tried to do it, I panicked. Why did I panic? Well, 12 years ago, when I sat down and I was hired to be chief storyteller for a division at Microsoft, I was super excited because I love storytelling. I'd written a couple of science fiction novels. I had a lot of fun in marketing, doing business stories, but for the first time, it was going to be very intentional, very much about helping this whole organization with storytelling. So the first thing I did is I went to go and try find some frameworks, some tools, some processes that I could use, that I could apply every single day, right? That makes sense. Why invent something? I mean, it didn't even occur to me to invent something. You'll find somebody must have done this already, right? And much to my dismay, I couldn't find what I was looking for, and I started to panic. So I don't want you to panic, and I'm here to say, don't panic. everything is going to be okay. And whether you are brand new to the world of business storytelling, or storytelling in business, or using storytelling for business, however you want to view it, or you're an old hand who's been doing communications for years and fancies yourself quite the good storyteller, but maybe you're looking to freshen it up in some way, or anyone, anywhere in between those two extremes, we've got something for you today. Now, the reason why I don't want you to panic is because of those three things that I'm going to be sharing. And the first one of those things is very apropos, shall we say, for today. And it's all about desire. Desire, what we want, wanting something. And what I wanted when I went to go and start applying storytelling in business is I desired a framework, shall we say. Keep it simple. When I went out there and looked at why did I start to panic? Well, I started to panic because the types of frameworks that I found, the types of frameworks that I came across were frameworks like this one you might be familiar with. Anybody familiar with this one? Hero's Journey. So the hero's journey, some versions of the hero's journey, like 17 steps. Now, bear in mind, at the time, my job was chief storyteller. So for me to be spending all of my time on stories and storytelling made sense. And 17 steps for a well thought out process might not seem unreasonable. But how many roles are there in your business that are 100% focused on storytelling? Now, if you get me waxing lyrical about storytelling, before long I'll say things like, story is everything, stories are operating system, story is always there. So you could argue that it's super important, and I often do. But the point that I was going to make is it's highly likely that your role is not 100% focused on storytelling. And even if storytelling is an important part of your everyday, it's likely not the only part of it. You've got a lot of responsibilities on your plate. Project managing, the things you're working on, relationships, your plans, coming up with a new strategy for the following year, learning new skills, AI, for example, learning new products, learning your own new products. If you work for a corporation, for example, maybe there's a new product that you've got to learn to sell or to market, right? You've got a lot on your plate. And 17 steps for the hero's journey is not really the kind of thing you want to be spending your time on. And that's why I panicked, because trying to apply this number of steps and this approach, it was a square peg, round hole situation. There's a lot of advice comes out of Hollywood for storytelling. Now, the 17 steps is a fair point to make, but the bigger point to be made is these are simply the wrong tools for the job. These are hammers where we need a screwdriver. These are a buzzsaw where we need a orbital polisher. Why is that? Why could we be talking about something like the hero's journey, which everybody knows is to do with storytelling, and to say that it's not the right type of tool? Well, without going into the history, the hero's journey isn't some type of magical formula that was designed to create the best stories. It was an analysis of stories that are out there in the world, literature, for example, film. And Joseph Campbell had a look at all this body of work, and he identified these common pieces, these common themes, these common components, and categorized them and wrote a fascinating book all about it. Now, why is that a problem? Well, the problem is that we're talking about artifacts. The hero's journey is an artifact about books and movies. And books and movies are an artifact for something even deeper and more profound. And it goes to that point I was making about your operating system being storytelling. Just so happens that we plonk ourselves down into the world every single day. Our brain takes all the inputs from everything around us and creates the stage on which we play. And we're hungry and we have needs, desires, and we want to go out there and achieve these things. And there are allies and forces that work against us. And we have to navigate our way through that and untangle the knots. And when we talk about that to other people who also experience life in the same way through the same operating system, it just so happens that the best way to communicate that is to talk about it in that common language that we understand, the common language that we have labeled story and storytelling. And so stories have these properties of being compelling and interesting and drawing us in. And the more we, as humans, told those throughout the millennia, the better we became at it. And eventually, oral traditions of storytelling turned into written traditions, turned into film and VR, you name it, right? The rest is history. So that's where all that stuff came from. It wasn't from some magical font of storytelling. And that's another reason why looking in those places, looking to the hero's journey, is not the right place to look if you want to get some basic fundamental tools that you can use every single day. On the other end of the spectrum, from the complicated 17 steps, we have things like, well, Matthew, why didn't we just do beginning, middle, and end? That's a nice simple structure, and it's only 3 things. You wanted simple, Matthew? You wanted a framework? That was your desire? Here it is. Okay, well, thank you very much. What do I do at the beginning? What goes in the middle? How do we execute on the end? The problem with simple is it can be abstract. In fact, I'm a big fan of this statement, simple doesn't mean easy. And in fact, if you put in the work, the hard work to make something simple, that's a really good example. And you're doing it by joining today and listening and learning about storytelling and story and these fundamentals, so that you can go and craft what you're trying to communicate in a way that's going to be as compelling as possible and as simple as possible, right? None of what you're doing is easy. You're putting a lot of effort into it. So the problem with simple is it can be abstract, and abstract can be complicated in itself. Where do we start the story? How far back do we go? Who do we include? Do we have heroes? We hear some people talk about characters, central characters, instead of saying hero. Who is that? Is that me? Is it my customer? How do I tell a story about me? Do I tell a story about my customer? And then in the middle, is that where we interact? Do we have to show some kind of progress? What do we put in the middle? And at the end, do we have to have a call to action? How do we articulate what the outcomes were? Is there an optimal way of doing that? So whether you're looking at the hero's journey, Hollywood, or something like beginning, middle, and end, you rapidly start to see how either things are too complicated or too simple. And I don't want you to have to go through that. My desire is for you to have something that sits in the Goldilocks zone. Not too hot, not too cold, just right. And having just enough in what that framework or that approach is that you can remember it and apply it. And then to leave it up to you to then be able to figure out what comes after that, so that you don't feel constrained by having to check 17 boxes and to understand what the dark night of the soul means, but also not to worry about forgetting what goes in the middle. So that is what I want for you. And that brings us back to our first thing that I'm sharing with you today. And that is that desire. So the thing that I want, the thing that you want, the thing that your customer wants, the thing that your partner wants. I had a fascinating conversation this week with somebody that was telling me about a story that they had to put together as a communications leader for their technology company. And the tech that was needed some love, needed some story love, wasn't even going to be for sale yet. And this company knew that if they didn't have the ecosystem, they didn't have all the things in place for selling this product, the partners, the supply chain, the suppliers, the manufacturing, the retail, if they didn't have all of these players in place and committed and interested, they wouldn't be able to actually ever get anywhere near this big shift that they were looking to achieve. So the story that they created, the desire that they had of creating this ecosystem, didn't even have a sales outcome in the near term future. But they knew what they wanted was to get people interested, to get the partners that they needed curious. And in so doing, set the stage for the next step. And that's why it's so important for us to think about this idea of desire. And not just about the story that we're seeking to tell. And that's why one of the reasons I often will say, I hate the word storytelling. People go, Matthew, what do you mean you hate the word storytelling? How can you say you hate the word storytelling? You're a storyteller. Your company does storytelling. Well, because the telling, that verb aspect of it, it corrupts how we perceive it. And it makes us, in many cases, think of a very specific type of story that needs to be told when we want to push a very specific type of action, a very transactional type of reaction. And that doesn't have to be from a company to a customer. It can be from a leader to their team. I want my team to do this thing. In fact, action around stories is so important. It's why the Storytelling for Action playbook exists, because stories do drive action. But the question is, what type of action are you seeking to drive? And when you think about what that desire is, that is going to help you unlock what type of story you might need to tell. Now you might say, Matthew, okay, well, who are we talking about? Whose desire? Well, you've got to think about the desire of all parties involved. If we're not honest with ourselves and what we're trying to achieve, we might make the mistake that technology company I mentioned could have made. And that mistake would have been thinking about selling this new technology and coming up with a story that we didn't even need to tell for multiple years, but then we didn't tell the right story that needed to be told now. So knowing what our desire is now as that technology company helps us understand the types of stories and the types of people and audiences that need to hear those stories right now. Now, what's another key desire? You probably guess it, right? The audience. Who is it that you want to be communicating with? And it's not just about the story that you want to tell. It's not just about, I need to make sure, and you do, that whatever story I come up with is going to make sense and resonate and be respectful and all of the other good stuff to the audience that I'm communicating with. That is true. But this is where the weakness in the word storytelling comes in, or another weakness, I should say. And that is, if we pull the telling off the end and just look at the story component and then ask, what does somebody want? What is the desire of this group, this audience, this market, these employees, these partners, these customers? Is we are looking at the story they're living right now. Right? What story are you living right now? What are you trying to do today, tonight, this weekend? What's the big thing that you're working on this month, this quarter? The same goes for your audience, right? Now, what are we doing when we do that? When we think about the desire of that audience, we're understanding them better. We're understanding the environment, the world, the story that they're living in. And then that does come back to, this helps us figure out the right types of stories to tell, to then move that audience in a direction to take the action that we want them to take. So that's the first of the three things. What's the second one? Well, and if you were paying attention at the beginning with the power of 3D story, it's another D. They all begin with D. So the next thing that we need to make sure that we're thinking about and that we're focusing on is everything easy in life? Do we always get what we want? If we think about today and Valentine's Day, if there's this very special person in your life, think back to when you started that relationship, when you wanted to make that relationship work, when you maybe pursued that person. Was it easy? Probably not, right? And that's because things inevitably stand in the way, right? It's always lovely when we get what we want straight away. But frequently, so difficulty is a vital piece of the puzzle. This could be a difficulty getting going. This could be a very specific thing that stands in our way getting going towards achieving the thing or getting the thing that we desire. Difficulties can also be anticipated or unanticipated. It might be very clear that if we're a mountain climber and we want to climb to the top of Mount Everest, then we're instantly going to know from all the stories that we've heard before, we're instantly going to know that there's going to be some very specific difficulties that we're going to have to manage through. We're going to get to such a high altitude that we're going to need oxygen. We won't be able to breathe, right? And you can see there's a good example of the relationship, the connection between desire and difficulty. I want to be able to breathe. There's no oxygen. And so I need to do something about that, right? So as you think about what I said about understanding your audience and the story they're going through, we understand their desire. Now we understand that second thing. We understand the difficulties and the challenges and the roadblocks, the decisions they have to make, the forks in the road, the menu of things, the prioritization. There's many, many difficulties that stand in our way. And what we're going to be getting to shortly is the homepage teardown of the unsuspecting company that we picked for today. And when you think about your homepage or your landing page for a campaign, whatever it happens to be, pick your poison, that not only are you going to be thinking about what does somebody maybe want to achieve, but also what is it standing in their way so that we can make sure we got the right answers for them when they come to the web property. Because if we haven't done that and we haven't helped them remove those things, then how are we going to be able to move them forward? Now, this is all very fundamental stuff, right? We're talking about storytelling, but we're talking about things like desire, needs, wants, right? And challenges and things that stand in the way. It's actually one of the things I love about business storytelling and spending my time helping people in business overcome their story challenges is it's a very natural fit, because business is about people. Business is about life. Business is about making things easier or doing things differently. And these are all very fundamental human activities. It's not just about telling entertaining and engaging stories that are enjoyable, but maybe don't actually result in some type of tangible outcome. But in business, there's a lot of tangible outcomes. And so that's when we look at these things like desire and difficulty. The reason why I zeroed in on those things to use for the power of 3D story, what it became, is because it's so natural, right? Beginning, middle, and end. Remember we talked about that? Remember we talked about how even with simple, it doesn't mean easy, and a simple framework can actually cause challenges and problems and raise questions and be abstract. The beauty of thinking about what the desire is, what the difficulty is, the beauty of that is these are very functional things that we deal with every single day, right? And so we've got those things that stand in our way. We've got those difficulties, and they are stopping us from getting to where we want to be. So what do we do? And what can we do to help other people who are stuck at that difficulty? Who maybe even don't even know that they're stuck until we help them see that they are. I'd like to think that might be the case with some of the website teardowns that we do. Well, we find our way through, don't we? And that third D it's not a simple word, but it's a beautiful word. And the word is denouement. It's a French word, and it means the untangling of the knot. Its direct translation into English means the untangling of the knot. And I love what it means, because it's so much more than just us as a company providing the solution. You know, the classic case study, problem, solution, benefit, or problem or objective, challenge, solution, right? It's so much more than just solution. It's so much more than that. It's everything that your audience has to do to figure it out and to make it through that dark forest of difficulty to the promised land of the desire that they're after. And again, if we look at the fact that people are living and breathing their stories every single day, the act of untangling the knot is an ongoing process, right? We solve one problem, right? And then there's another one. It's like, there's a lyric from 21 Pilots, and it's did you solve all your problems? No, thanks for asking, but I discovered a new one. What happened to what I shoveled under the rug yesterday, right? And it's this ongoing process that we're all going through every single day. Stories, little stories bleed into other little stories, into other little stories, into bigger stories, into the stories of our lives, right? And the same goes for business as well. So that one of the things I love about denouement is about how do we untangle that knot and being respectful of the time and the place and the context of that. And again, just like with desire and difficulty being these very functional, non-storytelling in the entertainment sense forms of the word, denouement is the same. The untangling of the knot, the rolling up your sleeves, getting your hands dirty and figuring it out. And so our job as the storyteller in business is to anticipate what that looks like. How is this audience going to untangle that knot? How are they going to approach it? What other difficulties or problems might arise as they go through that process? All of these things allow us, again, not just to tell the story, but to first understand that story, understand the story they're in today, the audience that we're thinking about, understand their story today, and understand that story that they could get to, right? And to help them see what that can be. And in that case, when you've done all of that, some real magic starts to happen. And that is the same magic we feel when we watch a movie and we get excited and we're putting ourselves in the shoes of James Bond or Harry Potter or Luke Skywalker, whoever your hero of choice is, but in real life. And that is the ability to paint that picture of what could be. But unlike the silver screen, we're talking about real tangible outcomes. And when you've done all the legwork of remembering these complicated three things, desire, difficulty, denouement, and spending the time with it, you are then able to come up with a communication that respects that, right? Even in a very small amount of copy, for example, what is found on a website. So we bring all of these things together. We have the power of 3D story. And another thing I love about this is 3D, 3 dimensions, right? We're looking at the story from all sides. We're looking at it from all angles. We've got this great perspective. However we look at it, we understand it. We've done the work. And if we do that work, we can then have a foundation, a narrative, if you will, that we can then go and tell all sorts of stories on top of. Now comes the fun part, the teardown part. I'm going to change gears and going to share my screen. But before I do that, I do want to mention that as per normal, the companies that are in our teardowns have no idea that we're picking on them. But hey, it's your website, so it's public and open to the scrutiny of potential customers and also me. The second thing, and the important thing for today, is this is a special edition. This is the Valentine's Day edition of the Teardown. So unlike our normal targets, who are tech companies, some of which of our past ones have been companies like Asana or Snowflake, today we are going to pick on not a tech company, not a B2B company, but a B2C company. And if I click the let's click the buttons right here and share my screen. Here we go. And here it is. Bouquets. Flowers. Now, Valentine's Day. Consumer. I was having a conversation with a tech company today, founder, friend of mine, and we were talking about his efforts at storytelling so far. And I said, you know, your topic is so rich in stories. And I'll do my best not to reveal who it was. But the topic that you have is so full, and there's so much opportunity. So it's so easy to find some good stories to tell, as opposed to, say, some other clients that we're working with who have got maybe some more traditional B2B tech, complicated, vast configurations of products where it can be a lot harder to zero in on a story. So even though they aren't B2C, like this example, B2C comes with that great opportunity to touch directly into people's stories, lives, right? If you're talking about a tech company and you've got a product and that you find that there's buying committees of 12 people involved, marketing, having communications, telling the stories that you need to tell to those 12 people across all the different potential touch points, it can get really quite challenging. And I've even said before on these teardowns, like, I get it. I understand what it's like to be in a corporation and the conversations that happen about what do we put on our homepage and the politics and the race to the lowest common denominator because of the politics and of people not wanting to challenge senior people or being scared or whatever it happens to be. It's even more complicated in those situations. So the fun thing about today is we get to do a teardown for a B2C company that sells a product on a day that's all about people's stories and about love and connection. And what do we have? What do we have? Do we have a shining example of storytelling here? Well, I didn't have to look far for a target today, because as soon as I picked this target and went to go review their website, I rapidly found that we had a lot that we could talk about. Shall we put it that way? Forgot the flowers. Remember, desire, difficulty, denouement. Desire, difficulty, right? Those are the kind of things we're looking for. So what are we seeing here? We'll cut out. We'll ignore some of the trimmings here, and we'll ignore the depth of the options, and we'll ignore the specific products that are available for sale here. And we'll stay focused on this above the fold. Okay, this high priority real estate, if you will. You can see what happens when you go down the page here, right? We're not going to spend time down there. We'll spend our time above the fold, as we all like to say. Forgot the flowers. What's that? Is that a desire? Is that a difficulty? Forgot the flowers. If you forgot the flowers, then last minute Valentine's Day gifts. Solution to the problem. So we've got straight in for the kill with some difficulty, and then denouement. Very classic in the tech space, right? Rapidly get into what the solution is, right? It's part of that is because of the curse of knowledge. We all in tech have to understand so much that by the time we end up getting to putting something on a website, we've spent so long in the weeds of the stuff that we end up throwing all of that stuff and those weeds up on the website. But here we've got forgot the flowers. What else do we see here? Okay, some buttons. Shop same day. Shop same day delivery in select cities, or gift them a flower subscription to keep love blooming all year. So So we've got a couple product options. We have a subscription option, and we've got a one-off option that are talked about, more parts of the solution. One of the problems when you don't have desire, if not explicitly called out, at least very closely under the surface, is you're not including a connection to your audience, and your audience in this case are the central character in the story at hand. Because remember, this isn't just storytelling, this is story understanding, story prospecting, if you will. Remember, we talked about when you think about the desire and the difficulty and how they'll go about untangling that knot, going through that their own personal denouement, that we're thinking about what their experience, their world, their story looks like. Do we feel as a potential customer here anything that could demonstrate that that has happened, right? And that's what I mean by just a click below the surface. Is it doesn't always have to be explicit, right? Certainly not going to put War and Peace level storytelling on above the fold on the flower website, right? But tapping into the right parts of story, those elements, those components that we can use to pull on the threads, the heartstrings, if you will, pull on the threads of story that connect to what we know about our audience because we've done the due diligence. So what does that mean for what we've got here if we ladder that back up to what we could be working with? Well, forgetting the flowers is clearly one direction you can go with, right? Maybe I didn't forget. Maybe I was planning this. Maybe I knew that nowadays you can pretty much order flowers last minute. And by the way, you want them to be fresh. So, hey, maybe if I do it last minute, they're more likely to be fresh. I instantly see the counter argument to that, which is, well, you order it last minute and all that's left is the not fresh stuff. So yeah, I could appreciate that perspective. But if I order this too far in advance, maybe the process is gonna take so long, and maybe it's gonna result in them not being fresh. Who knows, right? And in fact, do a little bit of digging, not too much, you'll find that it's actually an industry-wide problem. 50% of flower bouquets, 50% arrive either damaged or 1 to 3 days late. Was it 1 in 3? No, 1 in 3 arrive late. So 33.3 reoccurring late, damaged or late. So this is an industry-wide problem. What does that mean? That means if your story includes buying somebody flowers, then your story highly likely involves those flowers being late, damaged, 50% damaged, 30% late. Not a great place to be, not the best story in the world. If you can truly promise to make good on that and help avoid that, then you can tap into that. Yeah, I'll use the word use. It's okay to use things that are real. If you're chopping up vegetables, you want to use a sharp knife, that's okay. So yeah, let's use this. Let's use this fact. Now, what are some of the things that happen with flowers that are late or damaged, like wilted? There's words that can, like emotive words that we can start to tap into there. There's the story itself. Maybe there was a special moment that gets ruined because of this. I mean, now you're starting to kind of get me thinking about this stuff. And some people at this point will be saying, Matthew, yeah, well, we don't want to like start with scary things. We don't want to put the fear of God into them from the very beginning. And I get it. There's arguments to be made with different stories, different contexts, different stories that people are living, and the story that we want to tell them, that in some cases sounding the alarm makes a lot of sense. In other cases, maybe not so much. And in those cases, we might be talking about getting people to think about what's possible, getting them excited, right? For a better world. But what does a better world assume? It assumes that something's not great right now. And that means you have to have done that due diligence and find ways to then tell the story that surfaces it at the right level. So when we are book.com and we're trying to figure out what story we want to put on the website here, we want to be thinking about things like having that a clear desire, right? Having the right, tapping into the right emotions. And emotions are a physical response to hormones in our bloodstream. Our body uses those hormones as electrochemical messengers to tell us what's happening in our environment. The senses are picking up on what's happening in the environment. Our body is using these electrochemical messengers to get us to take action. And that's where the root of feeling is. And if we have a strong difficulty, we can tap into a little bit of that cortisol or that adrenaline. They're trying to tap into the adrenaline with the forgot the flowers, right? Rush, right? You tap into those a little bit, and then making sure that we're making good on how to untangle this knot. And what does that look like? Is it restoring trust? Is it a claim about the perfect bouquet? Is it something about a tradition or a moment that is saved, or a beautiful evening that is perfect because everything was perfect? It's that one thing, that fly in the ointment in the perfect thing can ruin everything, can't it? So what might some ways that we could approach this look like? Let's have a look, shall we? Let's go back to our little material here. So what about this? What do we have here? Best intentions deserve perfect flowers. You waited to the last minute. You were good intentions. You were going to do it, but you waited to the last minute. Now, if you have a good intention, even if you wait to the last minute, wouldn't it be nice if the intention, the beautiful, best intention, was met with beautiful flowers, right? The best intentions deserve perfect flowers. Never miss the moment, whether you're doing it last minute or not, right? You start to see how we're skillfully weaving the point in about the being late without saying being late, right? Now, we do have the opportunity to be explicit. Last Valentine's Day, her bouquet arrived wilted. This year, he discovered a better way. And yes, we are assuming in this case that it is a man buying it for a woman. He discovered a better way. Fresh flowers, on time, guaranteed. Now, there are some elements that we may see in what Book are trying to do, and in this we might see that they're talking about forgetting the flowers. But the point being is they haven't thought about the story that the people are living, right? And as such, what do we see here? we see what effectively is just a stock photo, and it doesn't get brought to life by what we're reading. Whereas I'm looking at the real example. With our example, when you read the copy and you look at the picture, it all comes together. It's all brought together into that one story. Let's have a look at another one. How about this one? This year, he got it right. The Valentine's Day that went right. Last year's flowers arrived late. This year, he found the florist that guarantees beauty, freshness, and timely delivery. Her reaction, the right one. We're trying not to overcomplicate the story here. We haven't given these people names, right? We're not war and peacing this. But what we are doing is we're making sure that the characters in the story feel real. We do that by understanding the real stories that are happening in the real world and then distilling it down, rather than trying to come up with what we think are the right things to say about the facts and the functional elements of the denouement, and then creating it from that direction. And that is a fundamental reason why so much web copy and other attempts at short, clear, crisp communication eliminate the story. And remember, I'm going to tap into War and Peace again. Storytelling gets people thinking the wrong thing. It's about tapping into the way that our brains work with story. And sometimes you have the opportunity to read War and Peace. Sometimes you have the opportunity to watch a minute-long video. Sometimes you read the subject line of an email. And it has to be the tip of the iceberg. And it's not the tip of the iceberg if the tip is not connected to the iceberg. And the only way you connect the tip of the iceberg to the iceberg is you figure out the iceberg first, and then you zero in on the tip. So in this case, this year, he got it right. Valentine's Day went right. So shout out to the lead with the positive message crowd, right? The Valentine's Day that went right. Now, what do I love about this? I love about the fact that this taps into the fear without triggering the fear. It's like, yeah, I want it to go right. Yeah. That's what I want. Yeah, I've got this big plan. I've got this whole thing I'm planning, and I'm going to do this, going to do that. Going to do a little thing and the thing over here and this thing and the flowers, and yeah, oh, it's going to be perfect. Oh, it's going to be spot on, right? And then we get into the subtitle, the copy, and we see that last year's flowers did arrive late. So then we start to go into the iceberg a little bit, right? It didn't go right last year. Now we're reinforcing what can go wrong. And then again, the beauty, the freshness, and also being on time. Now, we could have done something like the love that almost didn't arrive. Too negative, I think. Too negative. He thought he'd done everything right, ordering ahead, picking the perfect bouquet. But when she opened the box, the flowers were already withered. I mean, we don't have to go that deep into the difficulty. And you know what? A question I often get is, can a desire be a difficulty? Well, yes, because if you've got a splinter in your finger, and that hurts. Ouch. That's a difficulty. But that's not what we mean by difficulty. That is actually a desire. Getting the splinter out, stopping the pain, feeling good again, right? Difficulty is when you can't find the tweezers or you've pushed the splinter further in. And at this point on the iceberg, the love that almost didn't arrive, it's quite poetic, but we don't have to lean that hard into a negative desire. Okay, so let's have a look at another one. It's our last one. This one will lean even harder into the positive. Not just flowers, a statement of love. There's no reason, by the way, you couldn't A/B test these and serve them up. All of them. Flowers that make an impression. Your bouquet isn't just a gift, it's a message. And the message should always be, I care. That's why we guarantee every petal is vibrant, fresh, and delivered right on time. So the punchline's the same, right? Each time the punchline's pretty much identical. But we're talking about the fact that there's a story going on here. There's people connecting, right? That's what I love about it's not just flowers, because it's not. Flowers represent something. Part of that is somebody liking flowers, somebody feeling good with a nice floral bouquet of flowers. And getting that person flowers, gift, right, is a statement. And it's a statement of what? It's a statement of love, especially today on Valentine's Day. It makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? And so that we then reinforce that with, it's not just a gift, it's a message. And then what do we want that message to be? And how is what is received going to reflect, going to represent that message? Right? What is the message if the flowers failed? That's why we want the evening to go beautifully, right? We want everything to go right. We want everything to be perfect. We don't want anything to go wrong because it's not going to send the message that we want. And when we make the effort, we do the due diligence and we check all the boxes on our to-do list and we get everything right, that demonstrates the effort that we put in, and that reinforces what we're talking about when it comes to Valentine's Day, which would be relationships, right? And so that's a message. So by thinking about all of this stuff, what is Valentine's Day? Why do people give flowers? How do people feel when things go wrong with something they've planned? How are the stakes raised? How are things even worse on a day that might hold some kind of special, extra, significant meaning? And we're talking about Valentine's Day here, but this could go for a birthday. This could go for, and I'm not just saying this because of flowers, but this could go for a funeral, right? If you're trying to create something as an act of something, an intentional thing, in this case, love, in the funeral case, love, right? And if things don't go well, we feel like our attempts to communicate through our actions have failed. And that's what we want to spend our time doing. And that's why storytelling is such a trap. Storytelling is a trap because when you just think about the telling, you're not thinking enough about the story. And when you don't think enough about the story, you're not thinking enough about your audience. And when you don't think about your audience, there's no way that you're going to be able to connect with them. And that is why we want to have a small, powerful Goldilocks collection of things that we can use in our mission to tell better stories, to connect better, to create the experiences we want to create within our teams, within our companies, as leaders, as partners in love for Valentine's Day, and in business, and as providers of services or as providers of products. And that is why story is so important. When we put story at the heart of everything we do, we're doing more than just trying to convince people with a great little bit of entertainment or raconteuring. We're understanding people better. We're understanding how to make their experience better. And I guarantee you, when you do those things, you transcend being a company that sells products. You transcend a company that is running an ad. You're not interrupting. You're not spamming people's brains. You're understanding them. And through that, you're gaining permission. And that's the definition of spam is unsolicited and unwanted, right? Unsolicited, not necessarily a problem if it connects with a desire fast enough. But unwanted, interrupted, you don't want to be like that. And you could have the best story. You could be the best storyteller technically and tell a great story that doesn't connect because you didn't do the due diligence of understanding the story, of making the story, and then living that story in your actions and in what you say. And that's why this stuff is so important. It's the most important thing for you, whether you're designing and building a product, and you're an engineer, and you're trying to get people on board with you and get funding, or you're trying to sell flowers. So what a great opportunity we've had today to look at a very different type of homepage in our teardown. And we got to think about a whole different who today, didn't we? Because normally at this point we talk about early stage, late stage, right? What type of, I'll be telling a story that's going to provide enough of the tip of the iceberg for somebody who's maybe only just becoming aware of the category and the products, or somebody that's ready to make a purchasing decision. Today we had a different opportunity. Today we got to think about people who are buying flowers. And we did all of it. Yet again, we did all of it with those 3 simple tools. And simple doesn't mean easy. It took me a long time to put these together for you. And it'll take you some time to work with them. But the output will be simple to understand. Those examples that I shared, the different ways that Book could do their homepage, were pretty simple. But effort went into putting them together as examples, right? And the beauty, though, of the 3Ds is you can use it to see your story from all sides. You can use it to understand the heart of the issue of your customers. You can use it to help understand how your customers or your audience are navigating their challenges. And you can use it to help you figure out how you should be helping them untangle that knot. And then, and only then, do you then go and put a story together. This is a process. It's not just a noun, right? And as much as I criticize storytelling for the telling noun aspect of it, right? The process here is important, right? It's not just the thing of the story. It's how you came to that story. And that, if you go through that, is going to set you up for success in your storytelling. And that is why the 3D story is in the Power of 3D story is in the playbook. You can get this. You can get the first chapter of this, which the first chapter is the Power of 3D story. We have worksheets, examples. I'm a big example guy. There's too much theory in the world. People aren't like trying to pass some PhD in life. People are trying to get stuff done. And the playbook is about getting stuff done. And you can pick that up on Amazon. But the first chapter is available on the gonarrative.com. But if you want the Amazon link, you can see it right there. And practical worksheets. We use these in our workshops. workbooks for workshops, but you can use it at home, in your home office, away from your computer, away from business, just working on figuring out the story that your customers are living. And that is a lot of fun. So I hope you've had as much fun today as I have. But what next? What should you do? What is next? Well, you've got a story to tell, I'm sure. What story will you tell? I'm excited to see what it'll be. Reach out, share it. Let me know what your questions are. Connect on LinkedIn. I share a lot of stories and ideas on LinkedIn. So join in on some of those and ask questions and shoot me a message and let me know what story you're trying to tell. And then go and tell that story with the 3 Ds: desire, difficulty, to do more. Thank you so much for spending your Valentine's Day happy hour in advance of your more exciting, I'm sure, happy hours that you got for the rest of the evening. And I can't wait to hear what stories you're going to tell. And if I could press the right button, so I wouldn't press the countdown button again. My philosophy, just press a bunch of buttons and see what happens. Anyway, there we go. Thank you so much for joining. Have a great weekend. And I'm excited to hear what